If you're dealing with a pathological narcissist, you have an energetic parasite on your hands. And you're dealing with someone that will suck the life out of you because that is their design. And oftentimes on the channel you hear me state that every single day a mosquito wakes up. That mosquito knows it needs to find a host. And that is because mosquitoes are parasites, and parasites need hosts. That is the law of nature. And similarly, pathological narcissists are stuck in a parasitic state. They are stuck at the bottom of the consciousness ladder, and they must feed on others. And this is because they cannot generate this energy on their own. They are stuck in a parasitic state. So understand that every single day a pathological narcissist wakes up, they need to find supply. They need other people's energies. You're dealing with an energy vampire. They need the supply from other people. They need other people's attention, other people's energy, other people's admiration, because they lost that connection to their true self, that true inner guiding light, that true inner being. That's the personality disorder. So you're dealing with someone that will suck the life out of you because that is how they were designed. And people, it is important to understand that you are dealing with someone with a severe illness. Now, narcissists pretend to be sane, sentient human beings, but that is the furthest from the truth. You are dealing with someone that lacks a true self. What it is that they mirror other people so that other people think that they are fairly normal and fairly healthy. But there is nothing healthy about a personality disorder. There's a whole word disorder in there. And what I talk about on this channel is pathological narcissism. It is pattern dysfunctional behavior because it is arrested development. They are based in shame because the disorder is born out of shame. It is born out of self-abandonment. And in shame, in self-loathing, in shame, the self hides. And this is where the maladaptive ego was born. However, today that maladaptive ego is not so much a defensive mechanism, but an offensive mechanism, because they're based in shame. However, that is wrapped up in dysfunctional pride. And that is the personality disorder. So you're dealing with someone with an inner core of self-loathing, and that is wrapped up in dysfunctional pride or grandiosity or egomania. So they also have a rigid type of perfectionism, so they are not going to change because perfect people do not need to change. Perfect people do not need to grow. And this is why pathological narcissists always will seek out scapegoats, you see. Because if they're perfect, then something must be wrong with you. Because again, they cannot self-reflect, and they cannot self-reflect because they don't have a self. The true self was abandoned. What developed was a false self. What developed was an ego. So remember that Narcissus from Greek mythology was obsessed with the reflection in the pool, in the pond, not with his true self. He was obsessed with the self that is external to him, the reflection. And that is why the story goes that Narcissus drowned. Narcissus passed away. He died. And this is a story, this is a mythos, warning of the dangers of self-obsession, warning of the dangers of a prideful nature, because pride will come right before the fall. And this is why pathological narcissists fall right back down to shame, to go through another shame pride cycle. They cannot let go of their ego. They cannot have an ego death. And since they cannot have an ego death, they cannot spiritually awaken. People, that is why you're listening to this audio or watching this video. You had a spiritual awakening, and to have a spiritual awakening, you had to go through the dark night of the soul. You had to go through the dark night of the soul to spiritually awaken. You had to have an ego death to spiritually awaken. That is why you're listening to this message. That is why you're here. That is you breaking out of the 3D, moving up to the 4D, 5D, and higher. That is ascension. That is the spiritual awakening. And that is the spiritual awakening that pathological narcissists cannot have, because they don't have a self. The self was abandoned for ego. They believe they are the ego. That's the disorder. They believe they are the ego, so they cannot have an ego death. What pathological narcissists actually experience is called a narcissistic injury. And what is a narcissistic injury? When you injure the narcissist, people, they have a narcissistic injury. And a narcissistic injury is when a pathological narcissist perceives a threat, whether real or imagined, that goes against the ego, that goes against the false self that they believe is them, because they've identified with the ego. They believe they are the ego. So when narcissists have a narcissistic injury, they put on another mask, and another mask, and another mask, and another mask, because that's what the mind does. The mind generates thoughts. So the mind creates another egoic construct. Or you see where they go into narcissistic collapse or narcissistic mortification. It's all, people, an injury to the ego, the false self that they believe is their true self. That's the disorder. They have identified with the mind. They believe their mind. The captain is not on the ship to operate the ship. The discerner is not there. The knower is not there. And this is also why they cannot regulate their emotions. The regulator is not there. The regulator abandoned ship. The driver is in the back seat. Lights are on, but nobody's really home. And this is because you're dealing with a major dissociative disorder. You see, people, pathological narcissists had to abandon parts of themselves to survive. So this is why you are dealing with a shell of a person. That's the personality disorder. And it is pathological. It is textbook. Their empathy impairment is pathological. So oftentimes you are dealing with a very sadistic individual. They're very cold, they're very callous. And this is because they only have access to apathy. You'll find apathy down there at the bottom of the consciousness ladder. You can find apathy between shame and pride. So they're very cold because they're empathy impaired. You'll find empathy way up there next to love and kindness and compassion in the 500s. However, pathological narcissists are not at the consciousness level to give you love. Love does not exist in the 1D, the 2D, or the 3D. There's no love in hell, only suffering. Someone that does not have a self cannot self-reflect, and if they cannot self-reflect, they cannot grow. And since they cannot grow, well, they will regress. And this is why narcissistic relationships have to fail. They must fail. They cannot grow because they're stuck in a destructive cycle. They're stuck in an unconscious cycle, going around in circles, expecting different results because pathological narcissism is a type of functional lunacy. They cannot get to the level of rational thinking. You get to the level of rational thinking when you get to the fourth dimension or higher. So you will have circular conversations with pathological narcissists because they are going around in circles. And if you're not having circular conversations with them, then they are probably triangulating you with someone. And all of that is to get supply to feed the ego that they've identified with. And the ego always needs supply. The ego cannot be satiated. The ego cannot be full. So it is like asking, how many people does a zombie need to eat before they feel full? Infinity. And this is why pathological narcissists are people addicts. This is why they need a supply. And this is why you cannot have a monogamous relationship with a pathological narcissist. Their default setting is to be an infidel, is to participate in infidelity. And if they don't physically cheat, well, they'll emotionally cheat. They must get the supply from somewhere. They must triangulate. They must gaslight. Because the first person that they gaslit was themselves when they identified with the ego, when they identified with the false reality. So people understand that up is down and left is right and nothing makes sense because pathological narcissists are in the upside down. They are in the sunken place, drifting deeper and deeper and deeper away from their true self the more they identify with their ego. This is an ego-based disorder. Pathological narcissists have identified with their mind. They believe they are their mind. We are not our minds. Our mind is a tool. However, when it comes to the pathological narcissist, the captain abandoned ship. The lights are on, but nobody's really home.